Well, thank you for returning with us. Chris Gilmour from Absa Private Clients joins us live from our JSE studios. Chris, thanks very much for joining us, and sorry that we came to you a little bit late. What's driving the markets today?
Number of things, Nompu. We've seen a lot of volatility in recent times. And, the dollar has been pretty strong up until fairly recently, and then a day or two ago it became a bit weaker again. So, you get this nice dynamic between the dollar and commodities. When the dollar is strong, commodities are weak and vice versa. So I think we're really just seeing some of that playing out. As I say, over the past day or so, the dollar has weakened a bit, and we've seen emerging market currencies coming to the fore. And that certainly helped some of the resources stocks.
So tell me, Chris, do you think the buying up of US-denominated assets was a bit overdone, and that's why we're seeing it lose a little bit of steam at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point you make, Nompu, because I think there was a lot of, and Alan Greenspan coined the term many years ago, irrational exuberance when it came to this, because we still have to see a lot of the fine detail of President-elect Trump's so-called infrastructure plan. Goodness knows the Americans need it. The American Society of Civil Engineers calculates that the Americans, just to bring their infrastructure up to scratch, would have to spend about $3.2 trillion. That's a massive sum of money. That isn't going to be spent anytime soon. That's the first point. And secondly, we've got to work out where the money's going to come from, because it's going to be difficult to see how the US government can finance all of this, or even a portion of it, given the very high debt to GDP ratio they've got. So I think you're right. I think the markets may have run ahead of themselves as far as this whole infrastructure potential boom is concerned. And secondly, I think even if you do get this infrastructure boom in the US, yes, it might well prolong the US economic growth scenario, but I think we have to bear in mind also that the type of resources that will be required may be quite different to the kind of resources that were required to build China in its big tail end of the commodity super cycle, which ended a few years ago. For example, when you're building large blocks of residential housing, as the Chinese are doing right now, you require a lot of copper. For cabling and this type of thing. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the case that in the US you're going to require the same type of thing. Also, bear in mind that when it comes to iron ore, and as an input for making steel, the Americans actually recycle about between 50 and 75% of their steel. So therefore, they wouldn't be looking for massive amounts of iron ore to fuel their steel requirements.
Now, I see Asian countries are talking about sourcing crude oil from elsewhere. That's if OPEC manages to curb output and ultimately lift oil prices. How practical is that for these countries? And does it suggest that OPEC's strategic plan may actually fail?
Look, there are plenty of places from which you can source oil. OPEC just happens to be what we call a swing producer, to the extent that it controls about 30% of the market or thereabouts. So what it does is pivotal in determining the direction and price of oil. So yes, you can go on to many non-OPEC sources and get your supply. But having said that, yes, there are quite a few of them. In fact, there are more non-OPEC suppliers, obviously, than OPEC suppliers. What OPEC has done very cleverly in the past 18 months to maybe 2 years has to progressively let the price of oil fall, thereby, to a certain extent at least, forcing the US shale oil producers out of the market. They are now starting to come back because quite a few of them can produce oil profitably at or around these levels. So I think that in itself is probably going to put a bit of a cap on it, no matter what OPEC says about potential tie-ups with the Russians, for example, in terms of trying to put a cap on production. So yes, I think the Asians will be able to source oil elsewhere, but the price will probably be round about the same kind of price as the current levels, because OPEC, as I say, has been very clever in being able to move the price in the direction that it wants, in terms of them particularly maintaining market share, and the Saudis specifically.
Now, Chris, why is the rand losing a bit of ground today? It's weakened by as much as 2% against the dollar and even against the British pound. And of course, we know that it did strengthen on the back of reports from Moody's and Fitch, but we still have Standard & Poor's coming out with their decision on Friday. What's your gut feeling about their decision? There are actually two questions there for you.
Okay, let's take S&P first of all. Our view is quite simple. There's quite a big disparity between S&P's local currency rating, which is BBB+, and its foreign currency rating, which is BBB-. In fact, there's 2 notches difference. So S&P has the latitude, if it so desires, to collapse that or bring it closer, should I say. So they could quite easily reduce or downgrade our local currency rating from BBB+ to BBB, and just leave the foreign currency rating alone. And that means we wouldn't be going into junk. But, it really is up to them. They must decide what they're going to do. I think the events of last Friday could not really have been foreseen by too many people, particularly on the Moody's side. And the fact that they didn't even have a proper credit committee sitting down and doing the credit report, there was a credit opinion. And they just said nothing had really changed since May. But having said that, I think the chances of us escaping a downgrade from Moody's in the next 6 months, if we don't get some sort of growth, is quite remote. To your previous point, to the other point, should I say, about emerging economies generally. No, I think they've had a bit of a breather going into Monday. The other factor, of course, I think in the Rand's favour on Monday was the possibility that President Zuma might be recalled by the ANC's NEC. And I think that was undoubtedly a factor in the quite significant strengthening of the Rand yesterday. With the news that that hasn't actually happened, or we'll get the full statement after 2 o'clock, the likelihood is that it hasn't happened. I think that's probably what's pushing the Rand a bit weaker today.
Okay, Chris. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Take care. That was Chris Gilmour. He's at Absa Private Clients.